Hey everyone, this is Fabriel and welcome back. Since I have a free morning, I've decided that it's a good opportunity to make a new game discussion video on the latest games that I finished, which is Crimson Gem Saga on the PSP, published by Atlus, although developed I think by other teams like Iron Nos and others. Secondary, second with all due respect, secondary development teams. But the big thing is that this game is published by Atlus. This is the name that counts for the game price and everything. But apart from that, um, a wonderful, old school, very old school JRPG on the always amazing and all powerful PSP, a console that I always really enjoyed to play with. Um, I was really in the mood for a classic JRPG after the last one that I played was Tales of the Abyss, which is why it's a classic, of course, and I really enjoyed it. It's an action RPG. The story was really at times over the top. I made a long video about it. Um, so I was really in the mood for something classic. And boy, I mean, Crimson Gem Saga delivered. This cannot get more classic than this. I mean, I was not surprised, but pleasantly surprised, let's say, by how old school this game is. I realize it's a game from 2009, so it's almost 10 years old. But if you are fans of old school RPGs, I think it absolutely holds up. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess. I really enjoyed it. It's a great game that every fan of the genre should play. But as we will talk later, it's not for everyone. That's for sure, for different reasons. But let's go with some order. Let's start with the story, of course. And yeah, we want to go for a tangent here. So let's hope that I manage to keep the video in order. So before going into the story, let me just tell you, Crimson Gem Saga, it's not a long game. I was expecting something massive for some reason. I was like, oh, it's an Atlus RPG on the PSP. I'm ready for my 60 hours or something like that of experience. No. Including the grinding, that, as we might talk later, it's kind of necessary at times, but it's not a chore. Crimson Gem Saga was about 30 hours. And I was really surprised. Let's say for better for worse. I will explain why later. But it didn't bother me at all. I thought, while looking at the end credit, I was like, this was kind of short in the grand scheme of things, even though it felt a bit longer than what it was, if it makes sense. But at least to me, it felt I was playing the game for more than 30 hours. And very important, I think. This is something very important that occasionally, I think, us RPG fans tend to overlook, and that is a huge game, like a huge story, doesn't necessarily equals to a great game, a great experience. Say those 80 hours RPGs, or even more, like 100 hours, it doesn't mean that they will be automatically phenomenal. It really depends. There are various factors in that: your own enjoyment, your interaction, and enjoyment of the characters, and all various things. How much you like the combat system, and if after 100 hours you're tired of that. As I said, various factors. But to me, the most important thing is how the story is told. If it's well told, even a short story can be as powerful as an 80 hours, 100 hours storyline. And I can give you some examples here. Probably, I remember the first Golden Sun being a 30 hours or something kind of RPG, and that was a great experience, even though I think that Lost Age really built up and made the whole experience as a whole, because yeah, it was supposed to be one big game. Instead, they kind of chop it in, not even halfway through. But it was still a great experience, of course. I'm not saying anything against Golden Sun, because it's a fantastic game, and if you haven't played that series, shame on you. Um, what else? Now I completely. Oh yes, Lunar Silver Star's Harmony. It's the one I play, but Silver Star Story. That's not a long game, and the story it's very simple in a way, but it's so well told that you, by the end of the game, you feel like you've played one of the best games of all time, one of the best RPGs, which it kinda is. I think personally that it was a bit. I was kinda overhyped for Lunar, but of course I really enjoy my time with that. And Lunar 2 is one of the games I want to play the most, and um, I think the early Legend of Heroes games, like especially Prophecy of the Moonlight Witch, it's I would say roughly 30 hours or something more, maybe. But again, it has an interesting story for the time, so you see where I'm going. I mean, and if we look at our past, let's say the golden age of RPGs, the PlayStation 1, there are plenties of these behemoths of RPGs that are like 70, 80, 100 hours long. And if we have to be honest here, because along quite often, if we remove the nostalgia glasses, even with games that I love, we can see that for those 100 hours, let's say, there is a lot of filler here and there to just, fill space so they can make this contest of like who has the longest RPG. Like, oh, my dick is bigger than yours, or something like this. The games are still amazing, of course, and nothing against it, but a bit too much filler here and there. And I think that with a really, really long story, it's harder for the writer teams to keep focus. That's not a rule, of course, but I think it might happen. An example for that is very personal is Final Fantasy VII. I really lost interest with the story after I think maybe halfway through the game. I still beat it, but I was really unimpressed and uninterested by the game, which is a shame. I really wanted to enjoy that game. And it's not that I hate it or anything, I just... So all of this to say, yes, Crimson Gem Saga, it's much shorter than I expected. As I was expecting something at least twice the length, but at the end of the day, I really enjoy its short, compact, kind of simple but yet well-told story that was enriched by good characters, gorgeous graphics, a really fun combat system, excellent voice acting, which is important, and the result was a really enjoyable experience. So with all this long tangent, which I think it's important, let's move to the story of the game. It starts with a young man named Killian. I don't remember his surname at all. It was like von something. Von Rockhoff. Killian, who just graduates from, I suppose, a sort of military academy or something, to receive the rank of Chevalier. However, he's a bit frustrated because he has the feeling that everything in his life is kind of against him, because he always ends at the second place. He feels that he's very unlucky. Like in this, just at the beginning, they say he is the second best student, and he is really frustrated because the first one is a sort of rival who, especially throughout the game, acts like a real asshole towards Killian. But he will redeem himself. Very nice, I have to say. That was a really nice move by the game. A bit of a spoiler, but I didn't tell him anything important. So basically, he receives a letter of recommendation from his principal to join a sort of paramilitary organization with like slaying monsters, those kind of things in fantasy JRPGs. And however, on his very first mission, he's really basically this whole organization is slaughtered by a couple of demons. Like, oh boy. Killian, however, managed to survive, and he is saved by a young girl named Spinel, who is a treasure hunter. So the two of them decided to team up and to work together for a while until Killian decided what to do with himself, and they accept a mission of entering a very dangerous dungeon that, according to gossip or something like that, or reliable sources, contains a very powerful yet dangerous artifact called a Wicked Stone. And from there, the story builds up, and it's centered around the search for the rest, all the remaining Wicked Stone, basically forced by another military organization called the Order of Light, I think, if I remember well. This sort of monastic order, in a way, a sort of pseudo military religious group, which it's interesting because it also like delves a little bit into like religion, very little, in a way, like how like when politics and religion are mixed together, usually it's not a good thing. But as I say, very little. It's not like, I don't know, where religion is a primary theme, such in Final Fantasy X or Breath of Fire 2, which I really enjoy that. But it's interesting how the order actually turns out to be. So, as I said, this is just a story. Like, throughout this adventure, more characters are introduced. For example, a warrior monk called Laduk. Before that, in that dungeon that I mentioned, you encounter first a mage named Hansen, a very sarcastic mage, I have to say, a sort of what it looks like a sort of paladin called Geltz, and so I said Laduk, Geltz, and much later in the game, you're joined also by another character who's actually introduced a bit earlier, who is a elite member of this order called Acelora, a sort of like young female knight. And this is the cast of characters. So if we move on to the characters, since I was mentioning them, I have to say this was an interesting cast of characters. Although, if I have to be completely honest, they weren't as much developed as I wanted them to be, even though they, especially by the end, they had some development. Okay, it's like development is there, interaction between them is actually pretty good throughout the game. Like the exchanges between Killian and Spinel, or between Hansen and the others, with Geltz. I mean, there is a really good chemistry within this merry band of characters, especially when Killian, Spinel, Geltz, and Hansen at the beginning are together, like drinking after the completion of a mission. That's good stuff. I like them. I just wanted a bit more, but again, that's very personal. So I'm not saying this is a poorly developed cast of character, because it's not. Maybe all reasons and stuff like this, like a tragic past or something like this, maybe does not happen in the game, or maybe it does. But what am I doing? But the thing is, these characters will receive some development progressively through the game, and especially by the end, there are some really good exchanges between them. Like, there is a big twist that I did not see coming, and that was really well done. It's especially like this big message about greed and its consequences that was well done. I really enjoyed it. Especially like before the final battle, all shit happens basically. I was like, what the fuck? But I don't want to talk about the ending, even though it was great. I really enjoyed the ending. And let me just finish this by saying the ending in Crimson Gem Saga, it's very open. They can easily do a Crimson Gem Saga 2. It will never happen. And that's a shame. But overall, I really like this cast of characters. They're kind of your archetypes of fantasy characters. There's Killian, like warrior, the paladin, the thief, the mage. A sort of mix between knight and warrior with Acelora, the monk. So very typical characters, but they have they all have their own personalities. And I have to mention like a big a really big shout out to the voice acting in this game. It was really good for the most part. I was really impressed. I mean, this is a PSP game, and the voice acting, it was at least as good as Tales of the Abyss, which was a PS2 3DS game. And in some instances, I might say it was even better here and there, but it depends. Maybe some actors were better than others. So, but it all like added to the whole charm of the game and the interaction between these characters. So, also, like, I want to highlight how gorgeous this game looks. I mean, it's nothing mind-blowing. Bear with me. It's not like I don't know, what's a good example? Like if you play Tales of Berseria or like this, it's not a PS4 game. There you go. That's what I want to say. Of course not. It's a PSP game, but it looks like a very well-made PS1 RPG. And of course, I was loving it. I was like, oh, this looks so good. It's just like a game from my childhood. As I said, and it looks great. But you have to be a fan of that. As it says on the back, like, lush hand-drawn sprites. And I love sprites. It kind of like, it's something, it reminds me in a way like the Trace in the Sky trilogy. I love that graphic style for an RPG. In general, it's like, it looks so good. And like the backgrounds were gorgeous. Especially like the character sprites, the character design, all of that it's a really well made game. Although to mention, the weakest point of the game to me was actually the soundtrack, which it's good but not memorable. That's kind of in the middle. There are some good tracks here and there. There is a very nice piano theme that it's playing on some dramatic moments, and it's really good. It fits the atmosphere. But also other themes, I say, they're decent, yeah, but I mean, not as good. Like for example, since I'm comparing it with Tales of the Abyss, like Tales of the Abyss had much better music, for example, than this. Of course, like it's not JDK level, neither Tales of the Abyss was, but as I said, it's not a bad soundtrack. It's just like I wouldn't rush to buy a CD of Crimson Gem Saga. Unfortunately, I would much prefer having an art book, for example. I would love that, actually. I don't think there exists. And there's never going to be one, unfortunately. It's such a shame that it's a sort of niche-ish kind of game, because of course RPG fans, I'm sure they're familiar with the name or with the game, but of course, like with the most part with RPGs, it's still not a spread, or general gamers are not that interested, unfortunately, because as I said before, this is a very old school game, so you have to like that if you want to get into this game. And here's maybe where even RPG fans may be kind of, this is maybe too old school for me. It's kind of like playing Dragon Warrior 1 now, and a lot of people just look at it as like, what is this shit? Or if you're like me, it's like, oh, this is so awesome, it's so old school, because I love old school RPGs. But again, I realize it's not for everyone. Even RPG fans nowadays might not appreciate it, because I really enjoyed the gameplay. I loved it, actually. And because it's super old school. It's turn-based at its glory. It's the combat system, it's turn-based, like it's a Super Nintendo game, basically, even. It's nothing new at all, but I think it's done very well. And the combat system is more fun than it looks. Because be prepared, if you're interested in playing this game, be prepared, because it's not easy. It's quite challenging, actually. Compare like Tales of the Abyss, that's a cakewalk compared to this. I mean, you need to pay attention even while you're grinding, because if you're unlucky, even common monsters can kill you. But at the same time, the difficulty, it's not unfair. It's not excessive. There aren't really difficulty spikes. I mean, sometimes, like, for example, in dungeons or something, the enemies might seem a bit tougher, but the game offers you all the tools you need to counter this. And that's where I really enjoy the gameplay. First of all, there is a really good skill tree, and I will talk about that later. But what it really needs to be highlighted, it's the following up attack scheme. Basically, every time one of your character managed to land a critical hit, you can press the X button, and you have to be quick. It's like a fraction of a second. But once you get used to it, it's automatic, basically. You have to press the X button, and the character will do a follow-up attack. And if you land another critical hit, you can do another one. Basically, you can do a combo. Of course, some characters are more prone to this. For example, Spinel will do this constantly because he has probably a higher rate of critical attacks. While with other characters, you just have to increase their critical chances. But this is a very fun mechanics, and it really, really helps. So you need to learn to master that, because it makes the whole difference with the game. Because at the beginning, I remember that I didn't know about this, I didn't notice, and I was kind of struggling. I was like, damn, this game is tough. But then I learned about it, and I was really enjoying it. And it doesn't break the game at all, because the enemies can do that as well and kills you in one turn, if you're very unlucky, because there are enemies more prone to land critical hits. And one thing that I believe the game, it's not well made, but they could have done a better job. It's actually the HP system, because you don't have much HP in this game. I mean, I was at level 80, and I had basically 2 characters with more than 1,000, like 1,200, 1,100 HP, and enemies can like hit you for like a couple hundreds HP at a time if normal attacks. And if they can repeat critical hits, they can kill you very easy. So that's what I say. It's challenging, but not unfair. Also because you have a ton of skills. Healing, magic, combat skills. Some of them very useful, some of them less useful, I have to say. But not really, actually. All the skills are very useful. So you have all the tools to counter the toughness of the game. But again, between being very old school in the combat system, and also like the gameplay and everything, and being quite challenging, but not impossible, not at all. I mean, I beat it twice technically, because I thought the game had multiple endings, because there is sort of a twist at the end, a second twist after the final battle. And the first time I saw it, and that was like yesterday, let's say yesterday evening, before dinner, I finished the game. Was like, okay, this has to be the bad ending, because spoiler alert, I didn't beat the boss. He kills me, and there's the ending. I was like, okay, that's nice. We failed. That's a good twist. Let's see. I beat the boss after some grinding, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. You need to do some grinding here and there, but it doesn't really feel like a chore. It's useful actually, because you get money, of course, experience, and skill points that you can dump in the skill tree to learn your skills, and some of them, as I said, are very useful. So grinding, it's kind of necessary but not forced, and it's not very boring. At least it depends what kind of gamer you are. If you hate grinding, why are you playing JRPGs? It's kind of part of the whole experience. But so I beat the boss again, and the ending was the same. So I was kind of disappointed by that. But it's a pretty amazing ending. I really like it. As I say, it's very open, but the sequel will never happen. So to wrap this up, I think I covered everything necessary. This is an excellent game if you like old school RPGs. If you don't, I don't know. I mean, it's still a very good game. It's well made. It has this old schoolness at heart, which I always appreciate. It kind of like when I play Tres in the Sky. It's such an old school experience that I fell in love with it. The same was with Crimson Gem Saga. Maybe I was expecting something more from some of the characters, even though, as I said, by the end they're all well developed and they have good interaction throughout the game. Maybe, as I said, not Treasure in the Sky kind of development, but it's still kind of good. The combat system is a lot of fun and everything, but I also realized maybe this is not for everyone. Primarily because of what I like, the old schoolness. This is something that not everyone might enjoy, I realize that. But if you're interested, it's not a very long game. Once you manage to properly learn the combat system, it's not too difficult. It's manageable, I would say, but it can still be tough. So I highly recommend Crimson Gem Saga. I think this is an absolute must on the PSP. If you don't have that, I think this game might be available on PSN. I'm not entirely sure, but I hope so. And I'm pretty sure this game is available on iOS, of all things. It would be amazing to have Crimson Gem Saga 2 on the Vita. Of course, it's never going to happen. But who knows? I mean, it's been so long now that it's never going to happen. And also, like, since this is part of it's part of a series. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. This is the second game in the Astonisha Story series, which I own the first one still on PSP, even though it's not well regarded as an RPG. But we'll see in the future. So this is technically Astonisha Story 2, or it's also called Garnet Saga, I think, something like that. In the West was called Crimson Gem Saga. All of the I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I forgot. Whatever. But as I said, big recommendation if you're into old school RPGs. It's a really good, gorgeous game on the PSP. Give it a shot. I mean, it's always good to have this old school throwback here and there between our more modern games. I loved like to alter the two. Now I'm going to play my Danganronpa, another episode. I haven't got the third one yet. I know, but yeah, I think that's it. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Like always, I'll see you next time, and take care.